Now.
Okay. So I would like to welcome everybody on the first webinar organized by Brainspotting Slovenia team. My name is Mina Paš, and there are my colleagues also present, Sabina, Jana, and Tamara. This is Brainspotting Slovenia. So we are really, really happy and honored to host this webinar. And Mario, I would really like to thank you from all of my heart, and I think I speak also in the name of the three other girls. I would really like to thank you for all the teachings, all the therapy sessions, and for being here today and for supporting us. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to you. It's a pleasure for me to share this afternoon with you and to share what I feel is important topic for psychotherapists and especially for trauma therapies, which I find that is still very unknown in many professionals and practitioners. You know? So, yeah. So I would like to do this webinar in an interactive way because it's as far as I know, we have 2.5 hours, which is enough for me just talking myself. So I think it's good if you want to interrupt during my speech. Okay. Yes. Another way is to wait till the end, but because it's a long exposition, maybe it's going to be more flexible, more attractive if we interact. Okay. So remember, if you need to interact, just I close some of your microphones just for better audition for everybody, you know, and the native English speaking, just be flexible with my English because I know native and I don't have so much vocabulary as you have, okay? So let me share this PowerPoint. Okay. Okay, this is the webinar on clinical dissociation. We can call clinical because there are another types of dissociation that could be not clinical, you know. But dissociation is a very complex phenomenon, and many of the authors are not on agreement. So I want to share with you different approaches, different ways of seeing and conceptualizing what is the dissociation or how they categorize dissociation. And some of them divide or explain dissociation in depending on the symptoms. An important school nowadays is the structural dissociation model, which implies the division of the personality. And another important model I want to share with you is the 4D model that explains dissociative symptoms in 4 main categories, such as time, thought, body, feelings, emotions. You know, this will be the last one I want to share with you. And I hope that everyone can give a peel on the concept and some understanding of the phenomenon and ways to interact, to work with the phenomenon. Well, you see here my credentials are I'm a Brainspotting trainer, but my background is mainly on a psychodynamic approach, such as transactional analysis, but also a very relational approach, such as the integrative psychotherapies. So I describe myself as very focused on what's happening on the therapeutic relationship. And this is very, very important when working with dissociative clients. So first definition I want to share with you is this one from Spiegel. Spiegel defines dissociation as an involuntary disruption of the normal integration of consciousness, awareness, and control over one's mental processes. So it means you see this draw below, which is a draw of one of my clients that represents these inner fragmentations of the psychological phenomena. You see this heart with this cry, and you see kind of weaknesses in the environment that represents the parents and the siblings that were silent. And you see one part that is willing to see the pain, but another one that is blind in one eye. So this is a good picture, a good draw that represents how some of these persons can live their internal wars as fragmented or differentiated, you know. So dissociation is a disconnection between a person's thoughts, memories, feelings, actions, or sense of who he or she is. This could be a normal process that everyone has experienced. Examples of mild common dissociation include daydreaming, highway hypnosis, or getting lost in a book or movie, all of which involve losing touch with awareness of one's immediate surroundings. I think that we can recognize in ourselves that sometimes we can just live from the current moment, which is sometimes is even good, you know, when you are in a group or when the conversation is not quite interesting, our mind has the capacity to just to live the environment, to live this sense of reality. This is not a clinical dissociation, but this is just common phenomena. Dissociation is seen as a disruption or a discontinuity in the normal integration of consciousness, memory, identity, emotion, perception, body representation, motor control, and behavior. You see, all of these phenomena belongs to our way of feeling, perceiving the world. So that means that in dissociation, these different phenomena can not be integrated, in a sense that a person can't remember part of his life, or a person can talk about an experience, but without having emotions connected or even physical sensations, or on the other side, can have physical sensations, but not related with any emotion or any thought or any experience. Clinical presentations of dissociation may include a wide variety of symptoms, including experiences of depersonalization, derealization, emotional numbing, flashbacks of traumatic events, absorption, amnesia, voice hearing, interruptions in awareness, and identity alteration. You will see these symptoms along all of these webinar organized in different ways, in different categories, but you will see this, at least one of them, as very common in dissociative disorders. Dissociation at the time of the trauma is the primary predictor for a later development of post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, mainly dissociation is highly correlated with the freezing response. I will say the ongoing freezing response, such if we observe animals in the wildlife, freezing is a very automatic response to just to try to feel and to be seen as dead and to not attract the attention of the predator. So it's a very wise biological defense, and is automatically triggered, awake. The problem is when the victim can't escape from the predator. So this freezing response has to be maintained a long time. And mammals are not prepared for this ongoing freezing response, which means lowering our normal system of being awake, of being in life. Reptiles are prepared, but mammals are not prepared. So dissociation is very well connected with this ongoing freezing response. And so trauma doesn't exist in wild animal life, but it exists in domestic animal life and in humans. Why? Because in domestic animal life or in the human's life, the person, the individual, has to live for a long time with the same people that sometimes are the source of the threat and can't escape. So one important thing in trauma and traumatization is the impossibility to escape from the threat. So patients with chronic post-traumatic stress disorder cycle in and out of exaggerated levels of arousal and avoidance, of panic and numbing, of terror and confusion. So it's kind of a bipolar phenomenon to persons. And another important thing on PTSD is that the person, and in general, in dissociative disorders, is that people are phobic to connect and to remember on everything that could take them to remember. So this is a normal reaction when someone is facing a strong pain or strong threat, and this is just the way our survival intelligence reacts, escaping from the pain, escaping from the source of the danger. When in therapy, we should do the opposite way. Yes, we need to come back again in contact with the pain or the source of the pain in order to heal the wound. So the panorama of autonomic symptoms include pallor and flushing, nausea, abdominal cramps and diarrhea, tachycardia, and lightheadedness, diaphoresis, and shivering. You see how many somatic autonomic symptoms are connected with traumatization and dissociation. We'll say that when the experience could not be integrated, and these different psychological and physiological somatic sensorimotor phenomena were not possible to be integrated, the body remembers, the body keeps the account of the story. Here you have a list of traumatic stressors and the frequency, the relationship with traumatization. People that suffer sexual abuse, is 55% of them develop a dissociative disorder or trauma disorder. Witnessed domestic violence also is related, 39%, physical abuse, 27%, traumatic loss, 26%, witnessed physical or sexual abuse, 26%, witnessed community violence, 19%, motor vehicle accident, 13%, other medical trauma other than burns, 12%, victim of extrafamilial violent crime, 7%, burns, 7%, fire, 7%, witnessed homicide, 5%, and other types including dog attack, school violence, abduction, torture, witnessing serious injury, hurricane, etc. We should say that for dissociation act as a mechanism, it's required that the person, I say one condition is the person couldn't escape from the threat and was not able to manage the intensity of the emotions, of the reactions, But this also happens in the absence of someone that was able to protect the person, or someone that in the aftermath of the event was willing to protect, to offer security, to offer protection, to be available, to depend on them, etc. So is a mechanism that the person uses when there has no other way to self-soothe, to integrate, to come back to his normal state of homeostasis. One important author in the field of dissociation is Pierre Janet. Pierre Janet was a precursor of Sigmund Freud, and many of the current authors in psychotraumatology and dissociation are recovering the teachings, the writings of Pierre Janet. Pierre Janet, more than 100 years ago, defined dissociation as a lack of integration among two or more different systems of ideas and functions that constitute personality. You will see how influent is Pierre Janet in the authors of the structural dissociation model, for example. So here Janet is pointing out that dissociation means this fragmentation of two parts of the personality, at least two parts of the personality. Janet proposed that this deficit was caused by a lowering or limitation of integrative capacity, leading to an inability to integrate experiences, to develop an awareness of reality as it is, accepting it, and then reflectively and creatively adapting to it. In fact, Pierre Janet said that this person's lack of two main capacities, which he called presentification and personification, meaning that presentification is the capacity for a person to differentiate, to know that he is in the present, but also remembering his or her past, but differentiating his present and his past. And personification is the capacity for a person to feel the author or his own life history. So these two mechanisms are missing or lacking on the person that was not able to integrate experience. Janet identified dissociation of traumatic material from consciousness as a central defense against overwhelming experience. You see here another important nuance, seeing dissociation as a defense or as a way to escape from what is happening here now. So dissociation provides a critical psychological escape from emotional and physical distress associated with overwhelming traumatic experience, including childhood maltreatment, war trauma, and torture, from which no actual physical escape is possible. So that's another legacy of our survival intelligence. When the body can't escape, the mind finds ways of how to escape, how to disconnect from the body, how to handle these strong emotional, physical experiences that are threatening our life. So as dissociation is a mechanism trying to escape from what is the source of the pain or the threat, what we should do in treating dissociation is provide association. So dissociation is for survival, association is for healing. So we should find ways on how to help dissociative people to again inhabit or possess, and this word possess is a word that Pierre Janet used, possess our own experience. Dissociating people vary widely in symptoms and may experience any or all of them, all of the things from the following list. So you can check yourself, or you can think on your clients following this list, and see how many clients you have in your therapy rooms that could fit with these symptoms. Find yourself staying at one spot, not thinking anything. Just lose his gaze on the space. You have heard, and most of you, I think, you are trained in brain spotting, and we have this gaze brain spotting as a way to find this access brain spot for connecting with a strong experience. Feel completely numb. So the person is not in connection with emotions. Feel like you are not really in your body, like you are watching yourself in a movie. Or the person can say that he is experiencing his life just as he was watching his life behind the window, or seeing his life from the clouds, or in a movie, as it says in this statement, or in a TV, etc. Feel suddenly lightheaded or dizzy. When processing many traumatic memories, you can feel, or you can see these symptoms as dizziness as part of the dissociation. Dissociation also is experienced, so we can reprocess the dissociation itself also. Lose the plot of the show of conversation you were focused on. The person was talking about something and then forget on what was talking about. Feel as if you are not quite real, like you are in a dream. Or the person can see his face in the mirror and didn't recognize his face, or feel like his face is a strange face, a weird face. Feel like you are floating out of your body. Suddenly feel like you are not part of the world around you, out of the reality, not belonging. Feel detached and far away from other people who may seem mechanical or unreal to you. That's a symptom of the realization, the personalization, sorry. And we as trauma therapists need to develop this sensitivity to check, for example, if the client is, how the client is perceiving us, how far is seeing us, for example. And if the client says, I see you as in 10 meters far away from me, when we are in fact at 2 meters, that's a sign that the person is beginning to dissociate, Are very startled when something gets your attention. Completely forget what you were thinking just a moment ago. Suddenly cover your face or react as if you are about to be hurt for no reason. It's something that triggers the person and feel very suddenly in this being threat. Can't remember important information about yourself, like your age or where you live, or we will see this as a part of the dissociative fugue. Find yourself rocking back and forth. Become very focused on a small or trivial object or event. You see, when the person survives to very chronic traumatization, he normally develops this hypervigilance way of perceiving things, just as if his sensories, his perceptual sensory organs are trying to pick up any subtle sign of danger. Find that voice, sounds, or writing seems far away, and you sometimes have trouble understanding them. Another sign of the personalization, the realization. Feel as if you have just experienced a flashback, perhaps rapidly, but you can't remember anything about it. So it's kind of an image or sound or a taste or anything that can can be a sensory flashback, but the person doesn't relate with any special event and perceive your body as foreign or not belonging to you. Do you pay attention to these symptoms in your clients? Well, these authors, Cardenia and Holmes, propose a model of dissociation that includes two distinct categories of dissociative phenomenon, labeled as detachment and compartmentalization. So they classify all of these symptoms we were talking before around these two categories. So again, dissociation as escape can involve compartmentalization, where aspects of psychobiological functioning that should be associated, coordinated, and or linked are not. And this relates with the compartmentalization of the selves, the division of the inner world in different senses of selves or parts of the personality or alters. You will see this category much better explained in the structural dissociation school. And detachment including the personalization, the realization, and emotional numbing. So detachment implies a differentiation, feeling far away from some of these, from oneself, from reality, or from our emotions. So Steinberg organized all of these symptoms around these 5 categories. Symptoms around amnesia, phenomena of derealization, depersonalization, identity alteration, it means a change of the sense of self, or identity confusion, when the person feels, I don't know who I am, or is hearing inside of himself an internal, very highly internal struggle between different voices, between different senses of self, but is aware of himself. DSM-5 categorized these dissociative syndromes around these different diagnoses. Dissociative disorders, such as dissociative amnesia, depersonalization, derealization disorder, the dissociative identity disorder, DID, and dissociative disorder not otherwise specified. Here we can add also the dissociative fugue. We will see in some minutes now. And some selected other disorders with significant dissociative symptoms, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, somatic symptom and related disorders, schizophrenia, even borderline personality disorder, and others, such as eating disorders, feeding, and anxiety. We go to explain some of these main disorders now. So, dissociative amnesia involves not being able to recall information about oneself. It's not normal forgetting. This amnesia is usually related to a traumatic or stressful event. So some of our clients can come to therapy and tell, I have a loss of memories, I don't remember sometimes to what I go to some room, if I bought something or not. And some of them can say, well, I'm scary of developing an Alzheimer or a dementia, for example. So it's important for us to know that some of this forgetting is because of the trauma. If the person has a history of early trauma, it's better explained by this dissociative amnesia. we can differentiate three types of dissociative amnesia. Localized amnesia is a failure to recall events during a specific period of time. For example, the person can't remember her life from 5 to 9 years, or can't remember his life from the first 9 years of life, or in any gap, you know. Selective amnesia means that some, but not all, events can be recalled during a period of time. Only part of a traumatic event may be remembered. For example, months or years of intense combat or child abuse. But can't remember some details of the abuse, but can't remember, for example, can't remember the general topic that he was abused, but can't remember how or for whom was abused. And generalized amnesia, this is a complete amnesia for one's life history. May forget their identity. It has a sudden onset and is very rare. It's not very frequent. No. Another disorder syndrome is dissociative fugue. Classically, three types of fugue have been described. This dissociative fugue is more severe than amnesia, but has also, you see, the fugue with retrograde amnesia, which means that the person is not able to remember his past. That fugue with awareness of loss of personal identity. The person can suddenly lose who he is. Or fugue with change of personal identity. So the person suddenly feels another person or another identity. Yeah. During a fugue, patients often appear without psychopathology and do not attract attention. So when in this state, the person can appear very normal or congruent with his personality. On the other hand, some individuals may display overtly bizarre, disorganized, and dangerous behavior. So when we speak about traumatization, dissociation, is beyond the goal of this webinar. But in my understanding, sometimes this could come also from transgenerational trauma. So not every experience from whom we dissociate were lived by ourselves. After the termination of a fugue, the patient may experience perplexity, trance-like behavior, depersonalization, derealization, and conversion symptoms, in addition to amnesia. This kind of person suddenly recovered the sense of himself, but is not able to know what has happened to him. Dissociative fugue has been described to last from minutes to months. The personalization, the realization disorder involves significant ongoing or recurring experience of one or both conditions. The personalization experience of unreality or detachment from one's mind, self, or body. People may feel as if they are outside their bodies and watching events happening to them. Again, I want to emphasize this in the therapy room when you are promoting a reprocessing or just you are doing a traditional talking or relational therapy, to check if the person is dissociated or not. If you ask the person, how do you feel in your body? What are you feeling? How do you see myself? And then the person can begin to reveal his internal phenomena. If he states things such as I am not feeling my legs, I'm not feeling my feet, I feel out of my body. I feel as if you were 20 meters far away from me. This means that the person is outside of the window of tolerance. Is going to this dissociative mechanism of escaping from her experience. And for the therapist, it's very important to help the person to come back again to the present reality. The realization, the experience is the experience of unreality or detachment from one's surroundings. So in these symptoms, people may feel as if things and people in the world around them are not real. So many trauma survivors could survive because they try to think the event didn't happen to them, or in case of the personalization, that happens to another person. I have a patient that was, the mother wanted to commit suicide when was pregnant of her when 7 years old in the uterus. And then during all her life, the mother was just talking to her problems with her husband and her depression, her traumas, her pains, etc. But also from when she was 5 to 9 years old, the father began to sexually, cruelly, very cruelly, psychopathically sexual abuse of her. So you can see this person didn't have almost any early experience of having had a human being protecting her or comforting her or just taking care of her in a good way. So this was a very high damage of all of her systems. Her brain, her biology, her nervous system was affected, and all this psychological task that she has to learn then on her development were affected. This person nowadays has a very complex post-traumatic stress disorder and a strong fragmentation of her personality. I can't do any brain spotting with her, because she doesn't have the capacity to observe her experience, to feel enough differentiate from her experiences, as in order to have enough prefrontal activity to reprocess. I have to do most of the therapy relationally. This is the most important thing for her. So we have here also these symptoms organized in these types of experiences, the personalization and the realization around numbing of emotions and bodily senses, altered bodily perceptions, distorted sense of time, things seems unreal, this is the realization, feeling unreal, detached from oneself. You can then see all of these symptoms that belong into these disorders. And the post-traumatic stress disorder is another important syndrome with a highly influence of dissociative symptoms. The post-traumatic stress disorder is a phenomenon that is organized around these three main aspects: re-experiencing again and again and again the same event, the memories, the fear, avoidance. So the person doesn't want to remember, doesn't want to go to any place that can have some similarity or can act as a trigger to remember, to reconnect with the past experience, and a syndrome of hypervigilance. So the person here is very actively checking the environment, looking for any subtle sign of threat that could let him relieve the threat and the trauma. I know you all know about this, but just in case, we can do a quick review of the main characteristics of the PTSD. This intrusive thoughts, nightmares and flashbacks of post-traumatic events. In fact, nightmares are flashbacks that we have in dreams. So the person, when the system of the person, and this is very frequently in all traumatized clients during the day, they can try to distract themselves from not remembering, not connecting with her emotions, just working a lot or running from one side to other side, one thing to other thing. But during the night, the only possibility to try to sleep, to be able to sleep, is to relax our defense system. We are not able to distract ourselves. So that's the time when the parts that keep the pain, the terror of the trauma awakes during the night or in the nightmares. If you want, later we can talk about some tools to intervene with this kind of phenomena. Or if you want to ask me now, is also okay, as I told you. Hypervigilance, sleep disturbance, all of which lead to considerable social, occupational, and interpersonal dysfunction. And the last disorder in this category is dissociative identity disorder. This is the more severe, as we will see. Dissociative identity disorder is associated with overwhelming experiences, traumatic events, and or abuse that occurred in childhood. Dissociative identity disorder was previously referred to as multiple personality disorder. We should say that dissociative identity disorder is very highly correlated with very early traumatization in the first years of childhood and along all the development phase of the child. Symptoms of dissociative identity disorder include the existence of two or more distinct identities or personality states. The distinct identities are accompanied by changes in behavior, memory, and thinking. So any of these different identities has its own way of behavior, memory, thinking, a first perspective of a sense of who I am that can be very different from other part of the personality. The signs and symptoms may be observed by others or reported by the individual. Some of the dissociative identity disorders can be aware of these different personalities, but when the disorder is much more severe, this means that the co-consciousness is less. So the person can experience a part of the personality that doesn't know anything about other parts of the personality. Another criteria is ongoing gaps in memory about everyday events, personal information, and or past traumatic events. So the phenomenon of amnesia is also present in this disorder. And the symptoms cause significant distress or problems in social, occupational, or other areas of function. This last criteria is common in all category that should be called a disorder that affects all areas of function, different areas of function. So common issues and signs of distress caused by DID and other specified dissociative disorders are these ones. Memory issues and amnesia, suicide attempts, if I remember well, it's around 70% of people with a dissociative identity disorder has suicide attempts. A history of abuse and re-victimization. So the person, a way that person remember is to act out his own trauma, his own abuse. You see this also in children. They didn't develop their capacity to for symbolization. So they tell what they have lived or what other people do to them, just acting out the same thing, showing bizarre behaviors, abnormal sexual behaviors, etc. The phenomenon of inner voices, child voices, the phenomenon of identity confusion, headaches without any biological explanation, organic cause, body pain in different parts of the body. And these other ones in the right are also common in post-traumatic stress disorder, but also typically occurs with DAD and other specified dissociative disorder. This is dissociative intrusions, which are normally called flashbacks. Self-injury, as you know, self-injury is the function of the self-injury is not mainly to hurt the person, but it's a way that the person finds to self-soothe himself. Physiologically, this has an explanation as the body, when is wounded hard, release endorphins, and the endorphins are natural opioids that try to self-soothe the pain, but also is a distraction from the emotional pain. The person is more able to deal with physical pain than with emotional pain. So you can find some internal parts that are in charge of doing this self-injury as a way to deal with strong pain, emotional pain. Eating disorders. Again, we know that eating disorders are very highly correlated with early trauma, and the eating disorder can have different functions. Sometimes to eat was the only way the person could control something on her body, but many other times has a function of times to self-soothe also, to eat sugar and other substance that the person can experience sense of feeling better, you know. Panic attacks and anxiety, depression, and substance abuse and alcohol use. Now, so you have here wide constellations of manifestations of the trauma. So another criteria for these dissociative disorders is that the person has a history of having different diagnoses and hospitalizations. What does it mean? That it depends of what part of the person the psychiatrist or the practitioner is seeing. Some of them can be diagnosed as severe depression or psychosis or with panic attack. But if you observe this constellation in this wide spectrum, they are just different manifestations of this early trauma. Well, before going to this new model, I want to just give the opportunity for you to say something, how it's going, or if you have any question till here. Jean?
I have, it's going back a bit. I missed when you were talking about Pierre Janet, you described personification and I think personalization. I'm not sure if I have the terms, and I'm wondering if you can repeat those just to make sure I have those two ideas clear.
Yeah, presentification and personification. Presentification means that the capacity of the person to experience his present and remember his past. This is a very important capacity, as in traumatized clients. The past is in the present. They are not aware that they are remembering. You know, and this is very important for the practitioner to observe and to treat with it. This capacity, you know, as the amygdala is a temporal and is a contextual. Mm-hmm. The hippocampus is the one that is in charge of keeping the context of the experience, mm-hmm. and also to sequentiate the experience. But as you know, I know because you are an expert in neuroscience, during trauma, because of the excess of cortisol, the hippocampus is inhibited. So the amygdala is experiencing the event happening again and again and again and again in the present time. So the therapist should be aware of this and to help the hippocampus to do its work. When the therapist can say, for example, this is memory. You are here now in a safe place. I do not belong to your past. I was not there when this happened. So I'm here now. For example, all of these interventions are designed to help the person to differentiate the past and present. Okay, when the therapist is you see, when these sensations, experiences tied with trauma are very visceral, coming from the viscerals to the brainstem, and when the viscerals inform that I feel panic, the brainstem feels I'm in risk of dying. That's the logic of survival intelligence. You know, the subcortical brain has a type of intelligence which is designed to survive, and the neocortex has another type of intelligence that is designed to grow, creativity, etc., learnings, etc., are very different. Both are intelligence, but one is very fast and very goal-oriented to survival. The other one is slow. That's why the intelligence of our prefrontal cortex is not present when we have to survive, because it's very, very slow. You know, even though when we are in the healing process, we need to try to awake this prefrontal area to be involved in the reprocessing, on the integration. Okay? So we need to teach the clients, to help these clients, that even though they can be feeling very strong emotions or very scary sensation, physical sensation, they are memories. They do not correspond to the current present stimulus. That's a way to help them to differentiate that there is a source of information that comes from the viscera, from the body, but there is another source of information that can come from our sensory organs, the sight, the ears, the taste, that belongs to the present. And if he's able to differentiate that even I am very scary now, I know I am in a safe place now. That's very important for the client to learn and to handle that he can have an experience, but he is not the experience. That's around the phenomenon of presentification. So this means that for some of our clients, we need to train them, to help them to be more grounded in the present before, or to be able to reprocess their traumatic memories. The other phenomenon is personification. Personification means that the person tries to not be, not feel, not be as an author of his story, his history. You can observe this phenomenon, for example, when the patient is talking about himself in a third person, for example, or with an impersonal pronoun, for example. No one as subject to the verb. You know, that's a way that the person reflects on the language that he's or she is separating from her experience. You know, so the clinician has to be very aware of how the person narrates his experience, and these two phenomena, presentification, personification. Because as Pierre Janet said, we need to help the client to possess his own experience, to inhabit again his experience. You know, our experience is just of us. We can't borrow our experience to anybody. We can't. We try to project on others, but it's a failure. Always is a failure. Our experience is just telling our past life history, and to reprocess, to heal this, is to give the opportunity to our experience to tell the story that was never listened, never accepted, never embraced by anyone, even and mainly for the person himself. Do you have your answer, Jean? Okay. Any other?
I have a quick question regarding the percentage, the traumatic stressors way back about sexual abuse. 55% would have more dissociation. I was just surprised by at the very end, the witness homicide is only 5%. Because to me, that's a very traumatic experience to witness a homicide.
Yeah. Yeah. My explanation of this, I'm not sure if I'm right or not, but my explanation is that sexual abuse is a phenomenon that is the society hides this more frequently, doesn't want to talk about this. Many or a huge amount of sexual abuse happens inside the family, and the family wants to keep this in secret. So there is no option for the person to reveal, to share with other human beings, to say aloud, and to be helped. Maybe with homicide, the system, the social system, is more ready to, well, is more scary probably, because it could affect to everybody on the street. So the system provides more opportunities to speak about it, it gives more social protection. And that means, because was not the event itself what was traumatized the person. What traumatized the person was the lack of a social supporting environment. You know, if a child is raped or molested, but the child has the trust on going to his mother or his father or anyone and tell, it happens this to me, someone molested me, and the mother, the father, or the caretaker is just protecting in this order. First, protection, and second is supporting, emotional support. So if the caretaker is right in offering this support and comforting, then the person can reprocess, can integrate, and the event doesn't keep as a trauma. So the brain and the system is prepared to self-heal, but we heal in relationships. Or our brain will be able to go into the mode of self-healing. Need to be in safe, protective relationship. That's a requirement. You know, makes sense for you, Nancy? My explanation about these two phenomena.
It's fabulous. Yes, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Or we can go ahead. Okay. So it's going well. The topic, the content is okay. So now you have here another important model on dissociation, which I think you all know. It is the structural dissociation model proposed by these people from the Netherlands, such as Van der Haar, Nijinsius, and other from the United States, such as Kathleen Steele. For them, dissociation in the context of traumatization is best limited to a division of the personality into at least two dissociative parts that generate or can generate at least a rudimentary first-person perspective. So you see here this model very suitable with Pierre Janet's ideas. That's about the division of the personality or the compartmentalization of the personality. As a consequence, the category of dissociative symptoms is limited to the manifestation of these dissociative parts. So for these authors, symptoms are the manifestations of different parts of the personality. The domain of dissociative symptoms is constituted by specific manifestations of dissociative parts. And that other alteration of consciousness, such as retraction and lowering of consciousness, do not belong to this realm per se. So again, for these authors, the symptoms are just manifestations of dissociative parts. Later, we will see the 4D school, the 4D model that categorize the symptoms in other way, and I hope this will clarify these ideas much more. Dissociation in trauma entails a division of an individual's personality. You see, for them, here is clear, dissociation is directly correlated with the division of the personality. This division of personality constitutes a core feature of trauma. So for them, every trauma implies a division of the sense of self. Compartmentalization of the sense of self. The division involves two or more insufficiently integrated, dynamic, but excessively stable subsystems. What does it mean? Excessively stable subsystem is that these subsystems are rigid, are not permeable, are very close to the influence of other systems. That's why they remain unchangeable. They remain the same thing. And this is an important nuance also to take into account on how to work with them. Our goal as therapists is how to provide conditions for one subsystem be influenced by another or by others subsystems. Each dissociative subsystem, that is dissociative part of the personality, minimally includes its own, at least rudimentary, first-person perspective. That means that each subsystem has its own sense of the self, a way of thinking, a way of behavior, a way of feeling. Sometimes its own storage of memories or part of the story. Phenomenologically, this division of the personality manifests in dissociative symptoms that can be categorized as negative. Negative means functional losses such as amnesia or paralysis. So the person can't remember, can't feel. Or positive, this means intrusion such as flashbacks or voices. Or strong emotions. It means that they are very obvious for the person, very intrusive. And psychoform, symptoms such as amnesia, hearing voices, ego states, etc. Or somatoform, symptoms such as anesthesia or tics or analgesia. They categorize the symptoms in these four categories. Dissociation in trauma involves different types of dissociative parts that are mediated by one or more evolutionary derived action subsystems or emotional operating systems. This term was coined by Jack Pansep, that also call these as primary emotional systems. As we'll see in 2 slides, Pansep studied 7 primary emotional systems or emotional operating systems. Which is important here is that they base the creation or the fragmentation of these parts, ego states, based on neurobiological systems that every mammal, and I tell mammal because we share this with all mammals, are equipped when we are born, are genetically, biologically equipped. So many human mental and behavioral actions constitute manifestations of innate but experience-dependent, and in many cases, maturation-dependent action systems. What does it mean? You see, for example, these action systems are wired in our neurobiology. All mammals has the capacity to feel rage, to feel fear, but all mammals has also the capacity to take care of the siblings, the offsprings, for play. This is biological. We don't have to go to any school to learn to put these systems in action. You see here some of these emotional action systems. These action systems are around the manage of daily life. So are in favor of growing, learning, dealing with life. And we can include here, for example, the action system for attachment, the action system for exploration, and the action system for play. We can add here also the action system to take care of others, to the action system for social interaction with others. These ones are maturational dependent. For example, if the individual has developed and wired in a good way the attachment system, and the person feels in a safe attachment, then the following system, which is the exploration system, awakes, and awakes in a way that can be shut on the system that was previously mature. So when the child feels in a safe attachment, then he can go to explore the world, and he's not worried about losing the love of the mother. So these are maturational dependent. Mainly these approaches, the systems that are wired to deal with the daily life requirements. You have another package of subsystems around survival, around avoidance of aversive stimulus. Some examples of these subsystems are the attachment cry, hypervigilance, fight, fly, fake death, freeze, and recovery states. You mean? So every mammal has this different subsystem for survival. If one fades, if the attachment cry fades, then the individual goes into hypervigilance, to orienting his response to the threat. If this fails, or the threat comes closer, then awakes the fight or flight, fake, etc. We know that in traumatization, these different subsystems couldn't be integrated in a normal way. So they belong to feel fragmented. If you observe your clients in the therapy room, this kind of clients, some of them switch from one system to the other very suddenly, without any cue, and they are felt as kind of an intrusive, just trying to kidnapping the person. So the person doesn't feel in control of managing or using these different subsystems. Each subsystem has a speciality. Is in charge of a different task for the person. So in a person that has a normal maturation, a good enough maturation, the person can use these different subsystems, these different states in an integrated way. But the traumatized client couldn't integrate this, so he can switch from one to the other. These action systems are the base of the different senses of self. So one type of dissociative part is predominantly mediated by action systems for functioning in everyday life, the daily life. Metaphorically, is referred to this type as an apparently normal part of personality. This is a term that was borrowed from a psychologist from the First World War. I don't remember now the name. And these authors took from him apparently normal part of personality, which means that the person can feel, or others can feel, this part of the personality as apparently normal. Why is apparently normal? Because this part is detached from for example, emotions. So the person can handle things or tasks of his daily life, such as taking care of others, going to the supermarket, or cooking for her child, her children, etc., but with a lack of emotional response, of emotional life. Another type of dissociative part that is an emotional part of the personality, an AP, is primarily mediated by the defense action system regarding threats to the integrity of the body and or the action system for the attachment cry. As the attachment cry in children and when trauma also in adults is a risk, the lack of attachment, the lack of a supportive group put the individual in a risk of survival, mainly for babies. So these two types of dissociative parts, one ANP and one AP, one around dealing with daily life task, another one dealing with the contents of trauma. Based on evolution, these systems are founded in subcortical neural systems that human beings share with many other creatures and that have become linked with higher cortical functions. You see in this draw, which is an adaptation of Sandra Pols's draw that I made, Jack Pansep, you see here in the bottom, you see my pointer? Do you see my pointer here in the screen? Okay. Jack Pansep studied these 7 action systems, which he called fear, lust, care of others, rage, play, panic, and seeking. You know, he died last year, so probably there are more than this, but these ones were the ones that he studied more. These are biological modules. We are equipped, all mammals, or our subcortical brain has this when we are born. When we begin to interact with environment, with other human beings, then begins to shape what could be called social emotions or social states. This is secondary process, you see here. So shame, in terms of Alan Shore, is the first social emotion. Guilt or blame, but also empathy for others, mentalization, trust on others, or pride on oneself. These states that are in relationship with how these primary systems go in interaction with other human beings begin to be shaped and shape the quality of the sense of ourselves. But then these ones in the base influence this one in the secondary process. These ones in the secondary process also influence the higher tasks of our brain, the tertiary process, which belongs to our neocortex. Decision-making, self-regulation, reflection, mentalization, planning, etc. So our past history is always flooding, coloring, and influencing our emotional and our higher processes. That's why in therapy, we observe how the person behaves, how the person organizes, meaning to listen this hidden old history. Make sense? So this is beyond the goal of this webinar also. And some of you read my my chapter on the power of brainspotting on the frame, where I explain in other way how we go from the top to the bottom. Someone wants to make a question, I think.
Yes, Mario.
Yeah.
Can you explain the lower part of the image where it's written serotonin, norepinephrine, these hormones?
Yeah.
You started with the here, but can you explain also this? Yes, this one.
Yeah. Well, I'm not very expertise on this topic, but these hormones. Well, if you are very interested in knowing more about the brain, we in the Spanish Brainspotting Association had one day workshop with Amir Del Monte with his videotape, and it's very, 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 very good. So he explains very well, much more than this. But these hormones activate these different primary systems, in terms of calming them or awakening them, selecting which one of them is put in action. Well, they are implied on this because these action systems, in fact, react to the internal or external stimulus from the internal or external environment. They are very fast conditioned. We are prepared to. We do not have to think on this. For example, I have my little dog here. He's sleepy all the day. Now he's sleepy because I do not give any attention to him. But at night, when we are free and we begin to play with him, he very suddenly begin to play with us. And the same happens with the child. So when there is something in the environment, internal or external, one of these action systems begin to operate. Okay, and these mediators of these hormones are just mediators. For example, we know that in the attachment, in the bonds, with a good enough caretaker, we create opioids such as serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. They are generated in our human bonds and our mammal bonds, in fact. Okay? Any other question? You like this drawing? So
always
you knew it.
Always good pictures.
This is not the idea of Pansep nor Sandra Paulsen, but I put these ego states connected with different primary emotional systems, but also here in this level, but also here. So, for example, we can have some protectors, some parts that could act as protectors. For example, a part of us that could act as a perfectionist, being very, very, very perfectionist, wanting to know everything, but in fact is protecting us a deep sense of not feeling worthy, able. That was organized in this level, in this interpersonal level. Okay, so this is another way to try to understand how we can use some of our tertiary functions when we overdevelop them as in charge of dealing and managing our emotional life or trauma. Make sense for you? Okay. So another ideas of this structural dissociation model, these authors also talk about sequential or parallel activation. The dissociative subsystems and particular states of these subsystems can be latent or activated. So we have all of these subsystems, but when the requirements of the environment, internal or external, requires that one of them is activated, so awake, trigger. At times, only one dissociative part is activated, and this will sooner or later be followed up by a different subsystem. These authors call this phenomenon on sequential dissociation, commonly known as switching. The person switches from one to other. Is, for example, in a state of rage, and suddenly goes into a state of severe sadness, strong sadness, or strong fear, for example. The other phenomenon is parallel dissociation. In parallel dissociation, two or more dissociative subsystems are simultaneously activated, which implies the co-occurrence of at least two different mental or behavioral states. The phenomenon has also been described as co-presence. You can see, for example, this parallel activation when you find two parts, two states that are very polarized. You know, this morning I was working with a client, and she was treating with me deep sense of helplessness, hopelessness, feeling surrounded, submit, not feeling motivated to do anything, no hope. But I began to work with this, and very soon appears another state that was a state that asked her to be strong, to go ahead with life, to not need anything from anyone. You know, these two sides were in parallel, one tied to the other. You know, this strong part wanted to help her to try to follow her life without no needing from anyone. But in fact, these strong defenses are contributing to the problem. As much as they do not allow to trust on anybody, as much the other part is in hunger, is growing its need. And any defense is so good that is able to control all the time. So when the hunger is bigger than the power of the defense, so the person can't take good decisions, good elections. So that's the problem of this person. She was complaining, well, all of my relationships were bad. Everybody treated me bad. All the men I knew didn't love me well, because anyone can't choose well with a strong hunger, strong need. So I was treating with these two sides of her, these two parallel states. You know, it was happening at the same time. Well, I was in fact helping her with a more complex approach that I am telling now. I help her also to awake and to bring another states that we're able to differentiate. As she's a therapist, so she chose a good supervisor, she chose me and other therapists, and she began and she continued with them. So that's because they treat them well, they treat her well. So another parts of her has the cues to choose right people. But this part that has the cues to choose right people is not related with the other part that say, I don't know how to differentiate good people. So I can't do it because I don't know, you know. So that's a part of what sometimes we have to do, to put different states in cooperation and communication. For structural dissociation authors, an ego-dystonic phobia counts as a dissociative disorder when there is at least one ANP and AP. When the patient does not include two or more dissociative subsystems endowed with a first-person perspective, but only a singular first-person perspective, the disorder will not qualify as a dissociative disorder, but as a non-dissociative anxiety disorder. Make sense? So for them, dissociative disorder requires two, at least two, okay? Two states with first-person perspective. Here you have a quote of an author, Auschwitz survivor, to illustrate these two different dissociative parts. She writes, "Fortunately, in my anguish, which is the AP, I cry out. The cry awakens me. Me is the ANP. And I emerge from the nightmare exhausted. I become myself again. Myself again is the ANP, the apparent normal personality. The one you know, who can speak to you of Auschwitz without showing any sign of distress or emotion, the ANP. I, the ANP, feels that the one who was in the camp, the one who was in the camp was the EP, is not me. Is not the person who is here facing you. You see this narration of a traumatized client, differentiation, one part with what he feels identified, and another part that she feels is not her. Have you seen this in your clients? This is not me. I did something, but this is not me. Okay. So these authors differentiate between a primary structural dissociation. This primary structural dissociation has one ANP and one EP. This ANP is in charge of daily life, social engagement, exploration, play, rest. In some percentages of success, it can do this in a high performance level, but at least can manage in some way. And the EP that could be organized around hypervigilance, or fight, or flight, or freeze and analgesia, or submit and anesthesia, catalepsia, lack of awareness and response. So they are together and they know in some way each other. You see here kind of an interaction. You see my pointer, okay? This primary structural dissociation relates with post-traumatic stress disorder and simple dissociative disorder. Okay? So here, post-traumatic stress disorder is in fact a bipolar syndrome, one that reflects remarkable cycle of autonomic instability with patterns of heightened sympathetic arousal alternating at times with clear and dramatic parasympathetic dominance. So it's a bipolar syndrome. These periods of sympathetic arousal will include symptoms of muscle bracing, bruxism, ocular divergence, tachycardia, diaphoresis, pallor, tremor, startle, hypervigilance, panic, rage, and constipation. These states will alternate with parasympathetic dominance, including symptoms of palpitations, nausea, dizziness, indigestion, abdominal cramps, diarrhea, and incontinence. So going to one side to the other side, from the sympathetic hyperactivation to parasympathetic. Endocrinological measures tend to show a state of low serum cortisol, also commensurate with evolving parasympathetic tone. This trend is associated also with behavioral responses, including social isolation and withdrawal, substance abuse, so the person trying to take these opioids from the external sources because they are not able, they didn't learn how to create these opioids internally in relationships. Constricted affect, denial, cognitive impairment, and dissociation, all relatively parasympathetic states. So in this parasympathetic activation, which corresponds with what Stephen Porges calls the freezing response, the dorsal vagal response, leads the person to isolate, withdraw from the world. And they alternate between one and the other. Then the authors talk about secondary structural dissociation. And this is much more complex. So as we go in this continuum, the phenomenon implies more fragmentation. Here we have at least one ANP and more than one EP. Could be 2, could be 3, could be more. One that could be around hypervigilance and 5, one that could be around freeze and analgesia, catalepsia, lack of awareness and response, or submit anesthesia. Okay. This secondary structural dissociation relates with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, disorder of extreme stress, other specified dissociative disorder, and borderline personality disorder. Kathleen Steele proposed that borderline personality disorder belongs to this category and is best understood seeing mapping the fragmentation inside the person, different subsystems that are operating in different moments for different functions. So, complex post-traumatic stress disorder shares some symptoms with simple post-traumatic stress disorder, the sense of threat, avoidance, and re-experiencing, but because implies chronic complex trauma, implies chronic traumatization from early life, it has affect more systems. And they also show phenomena of affect dysregulation, strong problems with affective regulation, not able to handle strong emotions, negative self-concept. So the person has deep injuries on the idea of his or her self-value, and interpersonal disturbances. These people were betrayed by the caretakers normally. So they do not trust so easily. So again, for therapists, it's very important. Most of our clients come to therapy and one part of them are needing help, and they are aware that they need help. But as soon as the therapeutic relationship goes deeper, it awakes the emotional wounds, the betrayal. Then the other system is active, saying, do not trust. This person do not love you. It's not true. She's not interested in you. Take care. Do not trust. So for the therapist needs to be aware of these at least two systems. One that wants our hand, but other one that do not want, do not accept. Want to try to be self-sufficient. Doesn't allow other human beings to be close, to help, etc. Going into more severe dissociation, the authors talk about tertiary structural dissociation, and here the fragmentation is even stronger. Here you can have at least you can have two or even more A and P. For example, one that can take care of the offspring, the children, and another one that can go to work and to work good enough, and also more than two EPs. This fragmentation, as much as severe is the trauma, as early happens the trauma, this multiplication, the multiplicity of the internal system could be bigger, more complex. And also another phenomenon is that the co-consciousness is less and less and less. So in extreme cases, the person can inhabit one part of the personality that doesn't know anything of the others. You know? So this is a continuum. The Sidran Institute notes that a person with dissociative identity disorder feels as if she has with her two or more entities, each with its own way of thinking and remembering about herself and her life. It is important to keep in mind that although these alternate states may feel or appear to be very different, they are all manifestations of a single whole person. Well, this is obvious for us, but for the therapist to have this kind of dissociative disorder is as having in one client 5, 6, 7 clients. So it requires for us to develop a multiple way of treating the same person as if we have a family in front of us. And we need to train ourselves in checking the switchings between one and the other. Other names we use to describe these alternate states, including alternate personalities, alters, states of consciousness, and identities. People who have experienced physical and sexual abuse in childhood are at increased risk of dissociative identity disorder, mainly when this happens from very, very early in life. The vast majority of people who develop dissociative disorders have experienced repetitive, overwhelming trauma in childhood. Among people with dissociative identity disorder in the United States, Canada, and Europe, about 90% has been the victims of childhood sexual abuse and neglect. So here you have another picture taken from Steinberg. in the core of the picture, it has the main categories of trauma symptoms: amnesia, the realization, the personalization, identity confusion, identity alteration. But in the external wheel, you have the obvious signs of a DID. So the person can come to therapy because of depression, substance abuse, possession, hallucinations, panic attacks, obsessive compulsive symptoms, suicidality, time loss, sexual dysfunction, mood swings, anorexia, phobias, self-mutilation, flashbacks, mania, antisocial acts, etc. So for us as clinicians, practitioners, we should see what's behind, what's hidden behind these manifestations, these external symptoms, as a consequence or a legacy of an internal fragmentation and early trauma. We have here a summary of these three systems of structural dissociation: the primary with two systems, secondary dissociation with more complexity, the tertiary dissociation with even more complexity, less awareness, less connection between each subsystem. And here you have another graphic. In this continuum from primary dissociation that goes from acute stress disorder to persistent trauma-related distress, the simple post-traumatic stress disorder, complex. You have here secondary disorder of stress not otherwise specified, of dissociative stress not otherwise specified, and DID. Any question till here before we go to the last part of the teaching? No? No question? I have energy to continue a little more? Yeah? Okay. So we're going to have a look on this 4D model on trauma symptoms and some guidelines for treatment. This model is from these authors, Freud and Lanius. They organize the symptoms of dissociation around these four categories: time, thought, body, and emotion. And they differentiate between normal waking consciousness, which is in the bottom of each category in pink color, and two symptoms that are experienced in trauma-related altered states of consciousness, TRASC, in the top of each category in orange color. You know, the ones experiences in these states of trauma, altered states of consciousness are mainly dissociative. So they differentiate between these states of consciousness to discriminate between symptoms that are dissociative and not dissociative in each category. And we are going to see some nuances on these categories. In dimension of time, these categories are very, very important in trauma treatment. Dimension of time, the flow of consciousness across time is necessary to create an experience of the present, the now, in the context of a subjective past and anticipated future. And then under normal circumstances, time is experienced as continuously moving forward. One person with a good enough history has a sense of present, past, and future. But traumatized individuals often relive their traumatic memories through flashbacks and lack the ability to live in the now. I talked about this with Jean minutes ago, reflecting a key dissociative process associated with TRASC. So when flashbacks when these intrusive phenomena kidnap the person, these are in the category of dissociative symptoms. Reliving events are, in contrast to intrusive memory recall, most frequently associated with reminder distress and not involving an altered state of consciousness or dissociative process, but rather represent a state of normal waking consciousness. Reliving is different than the flashback. The person can be aware of some awareness of being in the being grounded in the present. Episodic memory and autonoesis, the capacity to mentally position oneself in the past or in the future, are particularly relevant to the time dimension of consciousness, as well as the experience of reliving flashbacks. So here the idea is that the person needs to feel himself belonging to his past, his present, his future. During a reliving experience, mental time travel occurs fully. It's kind of a fast regression, generally not by choice, and is usually triggered by internal or external stimuli that bear some resemblance to the past self-state. The ones that were trained in transactional analysis, we call this as a rubber band, going very fast into a state of progression. Some clinical applications of this category of time for trauma survivors, trauma patients, it might be critical to strengthen the self among survivors of trauma in order to facilitate the emergence of a mental time traveler that is able to remember rather than to relive the past. That fits with the explanation I gave to Jean minutes ago. Help the client to differentiate from having the experience, but not being the experience. Okay? So, in the encouragement of safe relationships, including the therapeutic relationship, is a key factor, and helping them to differentiate the cues to differentiate what is a safe relationship and the cues for dangerous relationship. Some of the parts, the subsystems, as I was trying to exemplify with the case example before, doesn't know how to differentiate. But other parts can have the ability, the skills to differentiate. When to be in good relationships, when to avoid bad relationships. Because these extreme parts that are more mediated by the amygdala, they do not differentiate. They spread over all the body. They don't trust on anybody, and this creates a problem. Enhancing mindfulness awareness of the present through mindfulness exercises. For example, helping them to put the attention on describing the current objects in the room, from the taste, smell, sight, sound, etc. Help them skills on emotional regulation. Breathe is a very important skill on helping the person to modulate intense emotions, or being in emotions there, but ask the emotion to come slowly, to express slowly, or help the person to push a wall, but and inhabit her rage, his rage, and listen to what the rage is saying, but not acting out the rage, not exploding the rage. Teach them distress tolerance skills, help them how to distract, how to go from one topic to another topic, to lead their attentional processes, and building the capacity for positive affect tolerance. this person has a hunger for love and positive effects, but they don't have this experience on their body. So they need to take in small pills, not too much good relationship, positive effect, but small pieces. Strengthening the sense of self through the use of present-centered therapies in combination with exposure to traumatic memories. You know, that's again, how we need to come back and to see and to embrace our experience, our trauma, but should be done with a foot on the present and another foot on the past. If the person is still not able to have one foot in the present, but has both feet in the past, it is more reinforcing the re-traumatization and not the healing. The dimension of thought relates to the understanding that consciousness is inherently referential, requiring both a subject and an object. In other words, one cannot be conscious unless one is conscious of something, which itself necessitates the presence of a conscious being or subject. Consciousness requiring both a subject and an object has been likened to a narrative, which entails perspective, a plot, and a structure normally consisting of a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's sequentiation. So when we tell the client, this already finished, or when we ask the client, what happened after this? Or who came to help you? Or when this finished? This is helping the brain to give this sequentiation of experience. Trauma survivors may exhibit distinctly negative self-referential thinking, including I am a bad person or I do not deserve to live. In this model, the 4D model, this type of negative self-referential thinking, during which the first person perspective is maintained, reflects normal waking consciousness. So this is not dissociative symptoms, okay? But traumatized clients occasionally exhibit alterations in the perspective of their narrative. These alterations can lead survivors to experience voices in the second person perspective, for example, telling them, you are bad, you deserve to die, you do not deserve love, etc. Which means sometimes interjected energy from a caretaker. This reflects a dissociative process associated with TRASC. Here, these authors are talking also about the fragmentation of the selves. These voices may represent distinctly different goals, motivation, and effects in the extreme case for creating the experience of possessing multiple selves. You see, in this model, they put this compartmentalization, the division of the personality in this category. So hearing voices is elevated significantly in individuals suffering from trauma-related disorders, including in individuals diagnosed with PTSD, dissociative disorders, and borderline personality disorders. Voice hearing is also related to the experience of dissociative symptomatology. Clinical applications of these phenomena categorized in this category of thought. It is crucial to create a shared narrative by identifying the strengths of each voice or self-state in the present and by encouraging awareness and communication among different voices and states, thereby facilitating collaboration between or among distinctly compartmentalized states. This was the case I was illustrating some minutes ago with this client I attended this morning. You remember the vulnerable part that has hunger, needing to be loved and longing for love, but the other that was strong and defending. You do not need to have to be strong. You have to go ahead with life. And during the process, I was calling also the part of her that was able, because this strong part was stating that I don't know how to love, but I know she has a son, and now she's also a grandmother, and I know she loves her son, and she loves her grandson. So I asked her, well, I know that there is a part of you that is able to express and feel love towards your grandson. Just call this part of you, and call this part, and show to this other part how you can love your kids, you know. And then this part that didn't trust on anybody began to say, but I don't know how to differentiate. So again, I call another part of her, a part of her that is able to, because she changed her supervisor. He chose some therapy. So there should be something that this other state is able to discriminate, choosing good and not so good therapists or good and not so good supervisors. So I call this part also to help this. The goal was putting in connection, in communication, different states with different strengths, different skills, different qualities, different knowledges, and to influence each other and to listen each other, because every subsystem has an important survival function. Every of them, you know, even the more harshful, the ones that are more critical, has an important survival function. That means that want something important to help the individual to survive, but they are not open to new influences, to new repertories of behavior or feelings, etc. So that's one of the goals in working with this phenomenon. The latter is also critical in fostering self-compassion, which is sorely lacking in many survivors of chronic trauma due to ongoing conflict among different voices or self-states. I like to say that trauma was once an interpersonal issue, but now is kept as an intrapersonal phenomenon. So the maltreatment that the person sometimes lives on his external relationships now is reactivated internally. There is parts of her or him that are maltreating him. So keeping the process on a re-traumatization cycle. So it's very important to help the person to develop this sense of self-compassion and help that the most vulnerable hurtful parts can be in connection with more empathic parts. Make sense for you? You know, for example, this woman in the morning, she's very, very able to take care of others. She's a good therapist. So she has a high capacity for empathy with others, to take care of others, to love the grandson, to love the son. This action system of taking care of others is active towards the external world. It's not active towards the internal world. And we want to make this connection internally. Make sense? Okay. Dimension of the body. Among individuals who suffer from the aftermath of trauma, the mind-body connection is often severe, leading to the subjective experience of feeling partially or fully detached from one's body, or alternatively, as if one's body does not belong to oneself. These experiences form the core of symptoms of depersonalization. In the 4D model, depersonalization experiences are consistent with TRASC, so are dissociative. By contrast, physiological hyperarousal is thought to represent the non-dissociative or normal waking consciousness continuum of the body dimension of consciousness. Clinical applications of this category, the body scan meditations intended to facilitate awareness and the monitoring bodily sensations form a central part of mindfulness-based intervention and provide an important means of assessing states of full or partial depersonalization. So helping the person to be aware of subtle sensations in a mindfulness state is quite good, quite important. Or provide the person to experiments in therapy, for example, touching a cousin or touching a soft object and describe this, and awakening the sense of feeling good sensation, good feelings, not associated with trauma. So, for example, you can provide an experiment just touching the hand. The client can touch her own hand, but with the goal to study, to observe, to describe the sensations. And this is awakening sensations not connected with trauma, for example. Awakening the sense of being alive, being in the body. At the same time, they enhance the capacity for interceptive awareness and diminishing detachment from bodily states. Which is important here, I want to emphasize this, is that they are so afraid of feeling, because feeling is normally remembering the trauma, that sometimes is first to help them to connect with sensations and feelings not associated with trauma first. And this is also fostering a sense of control on his attentional processes. They can put the attention on something, or they can put the attention in another thing. They can escape from the emotions connected with trauma to the emotions out of the trauma. It's helping the brain how to escape. Make sense? Change the focus of the attention. Body scans must be carried in a trauma-sensitive way in order to prevent the traumatized individual from becoming overwhelmed during this exercise. It's more of the same. We should be very sensitive with this exercise and very directive. The dimension of the emotion in the aftermath of trauma, emotion dysregulation can range from states of emotional undermodulation, during which the individual experiences painful states of fear, anger, guilt, and shame, to states of emotional overmodulation, during which the individual experiences emotional detachment, such as states of depersonalization, derealization, emotional numbing, and affective shutdown. Many traumatized individuals frequently experience intense emotional states to the point that they no longer have the experience of having an emotion, but rather feel like they are the emotion. In the 4D model, will be conceptualized as a state of normal waking consciousness rather than representing a dissociative process. So just being overwhelmed by an emotion is not considered as a dissociative process. Experience of extreme emotional numbing, an affective shutdown, or significant compartmentalization of emotion to the point where different emotional states are experienced as being felt by a perceived other, is conceptualized as a dissociative process or TRASC. This is consistent with the structural dissociation model. Clinical applications here again are help in overcoming emotional numbing and affective shutdown may center around assisting the traumatized individual to shift out of his/her shutdown state in order to be able to feel a full range of emotions, particularly pleasure and joy. Again, here is a recommendation to help the client to have experiences also out of the therapy session during the week on experiencing good emotions, good states. And I agree with Bessel van der Kolk, and how important is to invite these clients to engage in some activities such as singing in a chorus or dancing or I like these cooperative activities because they have to synchronize with other human beings. It's not possible to sing in a chorus without synchronizing with the other one. And this promotes the activation, the use of this ventral vagal system, the social involvement system in Porges terminology, okay? Mapping the physical body sensations related to specific emotions through the use of body scans meditations can be helpful in helping individuals identify what feelings and emotions they experience. Those enable them to overcome symptoms of emotional numbing and shutting down. So you can create kind of a checklist of emotions to help them to put words and differentiation in subtle sensations and emotions. And well, it's a long way with them, but they tend to feel too much, feel nothing. So there's many nuances in the middle that is important to help them to differentiate. In the case of severely compartmentalized emotional states, treatment designed to facilitate collaboration and awareness between or among distinctly different dissociative parts of the cell. This is also consistent with the structural dissociation school of helping this cooperation, communication between these different subsystems. And this is all what I have to tell you. Okay, I know that maybe it was too much, but I wanted to give a deep teaching on you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have time now for some questions.
Have you seen many presentations where the dissociation takes the form of not depressive symptoms, but hypomanic or manic symptoms?
Many presentations, you mean clients? Yes, I have some clients in the past, not currently, with very manic. You know, your question is how to handle this or what to do with it?
Well, first of all, it's in conceptualization, because one of the things you said is often there's a dissociative structure if somebody has had multiple diagnoses or has had multiple hospitalizations. And so somebody comes to mind. But in her case, there's a history of trauma, but there's frank manic symptoms that emerge. And I guess I'm just trying to conceptualize, is this an extension of dissociation? Is this something else on top of it? So I'm just wondering your experience.
Oh, my experience with this client was that she was very, very traumatized. The father raped her during her childhood, and the mother was very, very neglectful. She was very manic. very manic. He has episodes of manic. He has to be internalized in hospitals for 2-3 times. And it was for me very clearly a manifestation of this traumatic past history. And we worked on that time, was many years ago. I didn't work in the way I work today, but again, I was working very relationally with her, with the different parts of her, you know. And this, she had a very strong phobia to feel, and as strong is as strong it is a defense, and these defenses can be very, very extreme. As stronger is the volcano hidden behind the defense. So much stronger the volcano is going to erupt very suddenly, very overwhelming. And the manic is kind of this one of these explosive when the person was very repressed on her sexuality, for example, then sometimes this manic part was acting out and having sexual relationship with people she didn't know, and doing crazy things and going very fast in life. And so my work was trying to call this manic part to the therapy session and to relate with her and to be involved with this part of her, and just help these different parts that just act out and explode in every place to feel a human relationship. How is to experience feeling safe and feeling calm with another human being. This part that are very, very highly dissociative doesn't have this experience. I think I told you weeks ago that for dissociation to happen is required two requirements. One is not being able to escape and not being able to handle with strong emotions. But the other one is that there was no one around. Dissociation is a defense of how to escape. The person has to do this extreme way of survival because there was no one in the outside able to protect her, to provide comfort, and to understand her. So we need to learn how to relate with these dissociative parts and to ask them to not escape, be here. We should do this now in a different way. Escaping was good, was good and intelligent to survive, but it's not good and intelligent to heal. It's different knowledge. And to heal, the person needs to be here, you know? So I remember another client that she was very, very, very activated in front of me. I didn't know her. I was in a demonstration, but I was seeing her very activated, and I asked her, what do you need from me to be able to treat this? I don't know what is happening to you, but I'm seeing that you are very, very activated. What do you need from me to be able? And she told me very suddenly that you be here, you do not escape here. So I said, yeah, I commit, I promise you, I'll be here for every second during this process, every second. Okay. And then she went to the issue, and very suddenly she withdrew. Very suddenly, she went out of the relationship and went inside of her. And I very suddenly also said, oh, stop. Moment. We didn't do the agreement in a good way. I promised me to be here with you. I need the other side, that you promise me to be here with me. This has to work in both sides. If I'm here, but you leave, you can't take advantage of me being here with you. So we together can be of help, can do it, you know. So that's sometimes we need to relate and to convince these dissociative parts to do not escape, that now is the time for healing. It's not anymore the time for survival. The trauma happens years ago. Here we are now in the healing room, in the healing time. Makes sense for you, Jean? Is the answer you were looking for?
Thank you. I can't wait to run back to the hospital and tell them all.
Okay. Any other question?
I have a question. I'm not sure what TRASC refers to.
This is trauma-related altered states of consciousness, which mean a state of consciousness of dissociation related with trauma.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Nancy.
I have a question regarding this versus internal family system that a lot of therapists are doing with their work. Do you see this internal family system as a continuum and then becomes more and more dissociative, then it becomes clinical dissociation? Just want to have your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I like internal family system approach. And in fact, I conceptualized this division of the personality with the structural dissociation model to explain how this split is done. But I like a lot the way internal family systems work with ego states. So in the internal family system, they talk about proactive protectors, managers, and firefighters, that are these protectors that are explosive protectors. And I will see the dissociation in this model coming from the exiles, which belongs to these states of overwhelming emotions, kidnapping the person, but also these firefighters that are escaping to addictions or strong rage or self-harm. Okay, that's the other side of the phenomenon of dissociation. Exiles as feeling the wound, emotional wound, very strong states of depression, shame, fear, panic, and firefighters. Anyway, the way of working is always the same in every school. Is calling and differentiating the different states that are involved in dealing with the problem, how the person lives the problem, and the therapies help to create an internal relationship of the person with every of the subsystems. So first, and this I describe in the chapter I wrote in the book, The Power of Brainspotting on Dissociation. First step is to help the client to be aware of the different states. Second step is to help the person to differentiate from the states, every subsystem. Beyond any subsystem, there is a dimension of the person that is not any ego state. It's just consciousness, awareness, loving kindness, self-compassion. This is not an ego state is not a part of the personality. It's a dimension of consciousness. And from this dimension of consciousness, the person begins to honor, validate every of his internal subsistence, and to listen the story of how every of these internal subsystems help in survival. Even if they are fighting between each other, they need to know the functions, the need, and the fears that any of these subsystems has. And then they begin to communicate, and later they could begin to cooperate, and maybe later they could begin to integrate. Make sense for you, Nancy?
Yes, I really like what you said about how we worked. We may have a different model, may have different models, different set of conceptual frames, but how we work essentially are kind of similar, even with the people thousands of years ago, the shamanism, they call it soul retrieval. So it's like parts of the soul just left during trauma, and then we're calling that part back. So there are many parts, many souls they're retrieving. I guess just it feels like a different terminology, but addressing the same things throughout the millennium of human history.
Yeah. If you see different schools that we're working with ego states, many of them has a lot of things in common, but the goal is the same: provide consciousness, communication, cooperation, and finally sometimes integration.
Yes.
In the integration, I will say more harmonization than integration, because every subsystem has still its specialization. It's doing internally different tasks, but then in an integrated, in a harmonic way. As we have a subsystem in our heart system, a subsystem in our autoimmune system, in our nervous system, every of them has specialties, but they work in an integrative way.
I think what I learned the most today is that I'm noticing the clients I had before actually had some dissociation, which I didn't recognize before. So that has been so helpful. Really appreciate it, and so happy that I'm here today.
Thank you.
With you all.
Thank you. Any other?
Thank you so much. I've learned a great deal. Very appreciative of everything you've pulled together and how you've explained everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you. You feel it was a comprehensive explanation of the phenomenon with implications for you to deal in therapy?
I thought it was really comprehensive, and there are things I want to pursue and go read a little bit more about. I thought it was really it was a very valuable presentation, and you should do it again. Have more people. Are you in Spain?
Yes, I live in Barcelona.
Okay, so they recruited you. The Slovenians recruited you to do a webinar or whatever you call them. Yeah. Qué bueno.
Qué bueno. Good Spanish.
Fabuloso. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias a ti.
Sí. Muy bien hecho. I live part of the year in Mexico.
Ah, you live in Mexico. So you understand a little in Spanish.
Poquito.
Okay.
I have a question, Mario. Did you have book in English yet? Did it was translated, your book?
My book, I hope it's going to be in English next month.
Next month.
Yes, next month. I hope my book, which is being called, the main title is Beyond the Ego. And beyond the ego means that beyond our senses of ego, we have this dimension of ourselves that is our loving, compassionate observer that is embracing, willing and able to listen to our survival systems and to accept in a loving way our survival history. And this, I tell that this is the principle of the self-healing mode of our brain, the capacity for our brain to be present and to listen the history still alive on our subcortical brain. You know, this dimension of our consciousness is aconceptual, atemporal. It's just able to accept everything with compassion and being present and curious. I call this our essential being. But it corresponds to this prefrontal capacity of meta-reflection, a higher perspective, and a higher value, and to create this internal attachment with ourselves, the different parts of ourselves. So I describe in 6 chapters how we build in our relationships our senses of ego, and we create our ideas of ego and our wounds. 2nd chapter is on psychotraumatology, how our brain is shaped around our relationships. 3rd chapter is on ego fragmentation, ego states, and how to work with ego states. 4th chapter also is on transgenerational trauma, how to work with transgenerational trauma, how we inherit the legacies of traumas we didn't live ourselves, but we inherit. 5th chapter is on the power of presence, structural silence, interpersonal relationship, healing relationship. And the 6th chapter is on how to use Brainspotting with all of these concepts. So I wrote a book on conceptualizing trauma, understanding and reading the legacy of the trauma in every client, and then how to use it also with Brainspotting. You'll have next month.
I don't, some of what you say sounds like kind of like an integration of Buddhist meditation.
Yeah.
Or Buddhism.
Well, I have a strong influence on this, coming from this, yes. In fact, you know, there's a Tibetan Buddhist has millenary practices on working with the psychological phenomena and our ego state. So this is very, very, very old knowledge in these traditions. It has some influence, but my main influence is from psychology, for sure. But yes, my core is very attuned with Buddhist meditation. Yes.
The question I have is that working with generational trauma, inherited generational trauma, what is your influence? And then how do you combine it with Brainspotting? Because that's my main interest too.
Yeah, I am very influenced by these psychoanalytic authors as Abraham and Torok, that are originally from Hungary, and they describe a phenomenon of the crypt and the phantom, the crypt and the ghost. As in the first generation, the person that suffered trauma encapsulate the pain, and this disrupt, kidnap the energy psychological and physical energy. This energy is not ready for the relationships with the offspring. So the offspring, and this was not reprocessed, was not integrated, because was not allowed by the culture or the society or the family environment to put in words. Was unspeakable. This was unspeakable. The first generation couldn't put in words. So the offspring, the son, is smelling that something happens, but is not able to know, to read, to put in words. So this is what they call, with this unspeakable, unnameable, not able to put in names, in words, but the song leaves this a kind of a phantom. If there was kind of a phantom around, taking in the energy of this encrypted energy. And the second generation, the grandson, is still getting, something happens, so the parent, the father or the mother, was not able to take care in a full way, in a way that is alive. So it also takes this energy. And what was unspeakable in the first generation, unnameable in the second, is unthinkable in the third generation. And in the fourth generation, even worse. So the third, fourth generation can develop, can express the trauma, inherited trauma in somatic symptoms, even psychosis or bizarre ways, you know. So we keep in our bodies the presence of these issues. And we can feel in our bodies the presence, the influence of our grandfather or father or uncle or any person, any relative, and the issue. And we can, if we work with Brainspotting, we can just look for the brainspot that connects with this presence, this energy of the person or the issue. And you also have some beliefs that are shared with the mother, the grandmother, the grandmother. For example, this is not only you. If you conceptualize to the client, oh, this belief, I imagine that was the same belief for your mother, for your grandmother. So there is a part of you that share the belief and stories common with your relatives. So it's framing, organizing a frame for the experience to travel on time over generations, and to provide the permission and frame for this information to awaken, to be released, coming from your body. Make sense?
Oh, that is so beautiful. I can't wait to read your book and integrating into Brainspotting the inherited generational trauma.
Yeah.
My background is more from family constellation, Bert Hellinger in Germany. So it's a slightly different, but totally same theoretical background, that we're one with our ancestors. And whatever that's unresolved just keeps on going through the epigenetics.
Yeah. Yeah, I also write about the influence, the epigenetics as one of the sources, how these legacies are conveyed to the offspring. Yes.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. So, if there is no more question.
Thank you, Mario. It was really, really enjoyable to listen to you. And just for the record, I saw that some of you are interested in watching a recording, and there will be a recording available. So we will send you a link and the the directions for watching the recording in the following days. So don't worry, you can re-watch it as if you want. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good idea, because I know that was too much content, but if you have the opportunity to go back again, you can digest in a new way.
Yeah.
So thank you to all of you for being here, to also give your personal time to be with all of us, with the Slovenian team and myself and the Canadian, the Americans. That's very nice experience for me also. Okay. Nice to meet you. I hope to meet you maybe in the international conference or somewhere in the future.
Can we go visit you?
Yeah, I will go.
Barcelona.
Yeah. Okay, or come to Barcelona to a master class or an intensive, or okay. You will be welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.